What's up, guys? Welcome to KP Community episode number 17. We got Garrett Phelps back in the house. Garrett, what's up?
Nothing much. Doing the same thing.
Long time no see. A couple episodes now, right?
Yep.
Cool. We got a couple things on the menu tonight. Going through a how-to. Garrett's got teed up a how-to for us. We'll be talking about the spine a little bit, bringing that to some external rotation discussion and then some velocity discussion. Excited about that one. Good stuff. I know we've talked about that one past couple weeks, so excited about that one overall. Getting in tonight, getting started up after our how-to, we're going to be going to a KP short, something we haven't done before. We typically tag on YouTube. You guys might see a category called KP Shorts. KP Shorts is basically just random content from us, talking about some of the things that we do and some of the things that happen on social media, some of the things that tee us up with some ideas. And so it's kind of creative from us, talking about specific topics. Had an interesting interaction on Twitter. Tend to be a little feisty on Twitter in my personal account. So was a random Sunday afternoon and decided to have some fun with it. So we'll be going through that tonight, talking about some biomechanics and checking out what some people had to say about mechanics. I gave it to the people. I let them choose and or let them respond, I should say, and interesting responses back. So we'll check that one out tonight as well. And then we'll wrap it up with the wrap as always, and we'll move into our next episode. Man, episode 17, like crazy. We're almost coming up on 20. I know, slowly but surely we're getting there. Guys, if you can, it helps us so much if you guys can like and subscribe to our channel. We have gotten such a cool outpouring at ABCA a couple weeks ago, people talking about the channel, some of the stuff that we're doing on it. Just been really neat to hear from you guys, and we appreciate the feedback and are trying to continue to develop this community recording. I don't know if it's a podcast. I don't know if it's a video podcast. I don't know what it is. But we've just been trying to bring some really great content to you guys to help you guys out, and hopefully it's been helpful. So you guys have ideas, if you guys have recommendations, you guys want to see certain people on the show, we can kick Garrett off at any time. I got a third mic too. I mean, we could keep you here technically.
I'll be in the corner.
Yeah, we can just push you to the side of the screen and maybe put somebody right in the middle. Yeah, something like that. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But if you guys have recommendations, please comment below. Let us know. And feel free to also email us direct, support@KineticProBaseball.com for any requests or inquiries. Big word. Ready? Jump into it tonight. Moving into first and foremost our sponsor, which as it has been the last couple of, I guess, months even. Shoot, it's been ProPlay AI. So let's dive into it. Garrett, have you ever wanted a deeper understanding of your mechanics? I know you always do. For years, to get fully objective information on biomechanics, you had to visit a biomechanics lab. This process was clunky, markers, a cold lab, expensive lab equipment. It was a process that many either couldn't experience or didn't enjoy. Good news, though, Garrett, great news. Today, you can get objective data on your mechanics right from the palm of your hand. No more awkward or expensive lab, just you and your phone. ProPlay AI presents Pitch AI. Pitch AI is a groundbreaking technology bringing lab-accurate data right to you daily. Never has understanding how to improve your mechanics been so easy. Just capture, review, repeat, perfect your training anytime, anywhere. Pitch AI. Check it out today at pitchai.com. Boom. Bouncing into our how-to tonight. All right, so teeing this up, Garrett. I guess give us a little background on this one. Kind of talk to me a little bit about what our how-to is about tonight.
Yeah, so our how-to is going to be about the spine, and specifically spine flexion and extension, and how those correlate to performance or ball velocity, and then also what to look at when we're trying to assess or train to get into certain positions to exhibit that higher ball velocity.
Awesome. Everybody always asks us two questions. It's everybody walks through our door. We always say the same thing. Everybody either wants to perform better or they want to stay healthy. They want to figure out how to stay healthy. So this can move into the performance discussion. Not to say that this changes anything and doesn't play into the health discussion, but specifically tonight, this is a good one for performance. And we say performance, it could be a number of things, but ball velocity is typically the one that everybody focuses on. So we're going to cater to that a little bit and discuss a little bit on ball velocity with that as well. So ready?
Yeah.
Let's jump into it. Garrett, what's up?
What's up?
Not much. Another day in the lab at KP, crushing it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Talk to me. If I hand you an athlete who has an external rotation issue that I see from the throwing side, what do you do from the strength conditioning side to kind of work with that athlete?
Yeah, so with an athlete like that, we're going to look at the physical assessment, and we're really going to assess their active range of motion, so being able to actively get into that external rotation range of motion. Whereas in the throwing motion, it's going to be more passive. So it's going to be seeing those two and seeing how they're different.
Okay, so talk to me about active versus passive. Break that down a little bit further. Can you help me define what is active range of motion?
So active range of motion is the ability for the athlete themselves to actually get into that range of motion, while passive is more gravity or force or velocity, putting that range of shoulder into that range of motion that we see in the throwing motion.
Okay, excellent. So I see a lot of guys that they'll say, somebody says, hey, you have an external rotation issue in the throwing motion or just in general, right? And immediately they go to just purely external rotation drills, right? Talk to me about kind of how you, we talked about the assessment a little bit, looking at the passive and the active side of things. Do you look at anything else? And then kind of how do you start to evaluate where to start with an athlete to fix the problem?
So like you said, the first thing we look at is that shoulder external rotation. But we know with layback in the throwing motion, that's going to couple external rotation of the shoulder with flexion and extension of the spine. So secondarily, after the shoulder is assessed, we look at that spine to see if they're either in this already extended position or if they're in a flexion biased position of the spine.
Gotcha. So you're talking about assessing posture basically in the assessment process?
Yes, rib cage and posture, they go hand in hand.
Cool. Excellent. So let's jump into a couple maybe fixes that we have for this, how you would approach some things. We'll kind of do a little spin and flash with the camera right here, and let's dive into a couple different exercises that you would kind of prescribe to some guys that have some of these different issues.
The first exercise I want to go through is the foam roller external rotation on a bench. Step 1, you're going to place the foam roller at the bottom of the rib cage. Next, you're going to lay on the bench, rounded over the foam roller. Step 3, you're going to take a deep breath. Step 4, you're going to position the shoulder into external rotation. Step 5, you're going to exhale the breath, trying to get as much rotation as possible. Next, we're going to go to our second exercise, chest supported rows. For chest supported rows, there are two setups. You can either use a bench on an incline draped over it, or you can use a GHD. For this example, we're going to use a GHD. Step 1, you're going to drape yourself over the GHD. Step 2, you're going to grab the weight. Step 3, you're going to take a deep breath into that lower rib cage. Step 4, you're going to retract the shoulders, bringing the spine into extension. Step 5, you're going to return back slowly, letting the weight pull and drag you down to the ground. So doing these exercises or exercises like these are going to help the athlete gain awareness like we've already talked about. But doing that over time and again, and then assessing them through the skill of pitching, through ProPlay AI, is really going to help us understand if these exercises are helping and actually driving what we're trying to get out of them from the strength and conditioning side. To finish it up today, these exercises are going to allow the athlete to bring awareness to the spine through flexion and extension, and hopefully allow this athlete to gain more external rotation in the throwing motion.
Awesome. Well, Garrett, appreciate it. Great how-to. See you back over in the booth to close out our KP community today.
Thank you. Was I supposed to say it?
We blocked it. We're good. Boom. So, dude, love that one. Really, really good. One of my things that I look at with this, you and I have had a lot of conversations in the past, I guess, over the winter here, really, with a number of our pro guys, especially. We're working really hard in the weight room. We've got some really big guys this year too. Just really, really big, solid dudes. So, I guess one of the things that we want to help some of these guys with, especially as some of them get a little older, typically they start to see a little decline in ball velocity, and immediately goes to, what can I do mechanically? What can I do in the weight room? And everybody wants to work harder, I feel like. And what we talk about here is really applicable because it's understanding and taking educated assessments at where we can improve. And it's not always just we need to push a lot more weight in the weight room. It's not always that we need to, drastically change our mechanics. Sometimes it's just applying some, better focus into certain areas and fixing these things. So I guess one really great example of this is we have and you know who I'm talking about. We have one really, really, really big dude. Like crazy big dude. And he's so like barrel chested and just like strong.
Yeah.
Like he throws baseballs and you watch him throw, he'll throw like 90, 91 miles an hour. And you watch him throw and you're just like, oh my gosh, like it's so little rotation and it's so little flexion extension. Like he lacks substantially external rotation. And he's just kind of like one of these guys where, he wants to ask the question like, well, what do I need to do? And you kind of look at me like, man, what, checks off all the boxes. Doesn't he get stronger? Like,
yeah, no,
and it's not always that we need to make him move faster because he's moving pretty quick.
Yeah,
like
he's probably moving faster than last year too.
Exactly right. So the question is like, where do we take our shots? And so I'll let you talk a little bit on that. And I'll talk a little bit about from the pitching side of it, I guess. And then we'll let you start off with the strength side of it though. So like where with a guy like that, who's so big, and looking to perform, so much better, where do we even start with a guy like that? How do you, analyze somebody like that?
Yeah, so with someone like that, we already know that they're going to be barrel chested. They're going to have this like very presented, like chest up flare, like really flat back. And with that, it's really about thinking about what is going to help drive that external rotation and thoracic extension to actually help lay back or get that external rotation that we're looking for on ProPlay AI. So we're looking at more of really smaller, more detailed exercises on trying to get that upper back to like loosen up, so it allows him to get a little bit more extension than what he is already being able to do.
We have a great relationship, and I'm trying to figure out how to pose this question properly, right? So we have a great relationship here where, we're in the same building, working with the same athletes, like literally handing them off session to session. Like guy leaves your weight room, comes to the throwing side of things. Guy leaves the throwing side of things, goes directly back to your weight room. Like, so the communication between us is constant, right?
Yeah.
When we talk about like external rotation, the research behind throwing, right, indicates that somebody who has more external rotation, so external rotation is that it's just correlated to ball velocity, right? So when we see somebody who has limited external rotation, typically that they're more correlated to lower ball velocity. So when we look at this, we see it as a limitation, right?
Yeah.
We assess that as that is a limitation. But I like what you said there. You talked about how the spine and external rotation work together. Elaborate on that more. Like explain to me what you mean by that in the sense of, so in the video you talk about a little bit how those pieces work together anatomically. How do you train specifically external rotation and then look at specifically spine, or do you try to kind of bring those pieces together in exercise selection?
Yeah, with exercise selection, it's going to be integration of both the rib cage and the shoulder and the scap, because they're so closely related. You really can't disassociate those two into two specific ones. You can, but it's going to be better if you integrate the two. It's going to be a little bit quicker, and it's going to help just integrate that whole shoulder and rib cage complex to allow the athlete to get into more external rotation.
So that totally makes sense to me. And I look at guys, we think like, oh, I have an external rotation issue. A lot of times guys think that they just need to sit here and stretch the shoulder.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not that simple is kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And we also see guys that have a spine issue and they think that it's literally just them sitting on a foam roller and just trying to work on like spine. And it's like, no, there's more that come together to this. And it's like you said, exercise selection, I think, is key.
Yeah.
You brought up some great exercises in the video, but it's, I think, analyzing that independently for each athlete and trying to figure out where we can pinpoint. It's not wrong in certain cases to just work on external rotation specifically, but how do we put these pieces together and how do we teach those pieces together? I think that's something that you even talk about it from a strength and conditioning standpoint. Like when you build a program, like in your strength and conditioning program, it's not just a corrective list.
Yeah.
Right. It's a strength. It's understanding quality movement in the weight room that oftentimes will help these guys. Do you want to elaborate a little bit further on that?
Yeah, so when we look at exercises, there's a lot of exercises that look the same, but it's the detailed of execution that is going to be able to really create the change that we're looking for. It's just the way you breathe, when you breathe, or how do you set up for a certain exercise that will make completely different exercise from somebody to somebody. So when looking at an exercise, you might be like, oh, everyone's just doing the same exercise, but it's the cueing, it's the ability to execute the exercise at a different level. That's what makes an exercise different, and that's what makes an individualized program individualized, not an exercise selection. So
Yeah,
exercise selection is important, but it's also from an execution standpoint that's going to really get the change.
perfect. Love it. And so I've actually watched you. We had this conversation a couple weeks ago. I don't know if you remember this or not, but I watched a guy do an exercise, and you and I were standing there on the floor, and I said, like, I feel like he doesn't even understand what end range is. And it was not that he wasn't getting to end range one way, it was that when he was bringing the exercise back across,
Yeah.
he wasn't reaching that end range just because his mind was that the exercise was designed for him to only go one way, one rotation. But in reality was it was a full range of that exercise and him not comprehending the exercise specifically, right?
Yeah.
So I think this comes down to two parts, and one that you and I take ownership of, which is we got to explain that better to that kid,
Yeah.
right? We got to help that kid really understand what it is that we're doing. But two, there has to be some ownership from the athlete side of it as well to ask the question, what does this exercise really do for me? Like, why do I really do this exercise? Not from the sense of I need to do this exercise to gain X, but to look at the exercise and say, how do I fully execute this movement quality? And how does this apply to what I'm really trying to do moving forward when I get back to my skill specific action, which is in this case pitching. So, I mean, follow up on that, elaborate on that. Do you got anything further on that?
It's just from we have to communicate, and that's where communication between us two,
Yeah.
but also the communication between us and the athlete is so paramount because every exercise can be done. It's just the way it's done and how detailed the athlete wants to be and how we communicate that exercise to the athlete is what's going to ultimately make the difference in the athlete being able to get into a different range of motion or be able to perform at the highest level is being able to execute that exercise to the nth degree. And that's really where being able to be dialed in from an athlete standpoint, but also from a coaching standpoint, to be able to educate the athlete enough on the floor to allow them to execute that movement to perfection. And then once they've done that, it's basically just rinse and repeat and add some load.
Cool. Love it. Talk a little bit about like if somebody's watching this, right, and they're trying to evaluate for themselves, like how do I know if I have a flexion extension issue with my spine? We talked a little about that standing posture a little bit, but how else can somebody identify that maybe that's a limitation for them?
Yeah, so from just a pure assessment standpoint, easiest way is to basically just put something across that rib cage. So if you look in the mirror, first one's going to be looking in the mirror and just seeing if we've talked about that. And then being able to just like hunch over and draw that rib cage down, and then take a deep breath without letting that rib cage rise. And if they feel like a huge pressure in that back, like the lower mid back, that's usually a sign that it's going to be like, okay, that's probably a flexion issue, just because you're not used to breathing that way. And we talk about breathing so much in the how to that's really how you're going to assess is the way you breathe. So if you breathe that and you're like, wow, I can't breathe at all, I can't take a breath in at all, you're probably going to be flexion intolerant. And it's just working through the exercises that we're on the how to and really trying to work breathing while doing an exercise to create that range of motion.
I think that's one of the most, flexion extension is one of the most overlooked things in the pitching motion. People don't really understand. You go from flexion to extension and then back to flexion very rapidly. And through very like large ranges of motion. So the more you have limitation there, the more that you're going to really find that it's hard to create things like external rotation. It's hard things to get like trunk flexion specifically at ball release, which we know has a higher correlation to ball velocity. These things are influenced by other pieces like the lead leg and timing of rotation, but nonetheless, we can't have a limitation in our actual mobility to be able to get in those positions. So I think it's really important people look at, take inventory on themselves and evaluate that. But then we also have a further education and something we've always reiterated, having that further education, that knowledge base, and understanding why it is that we do what we do in terms of certain exercise selection or certain exercise quality, and then being able to fix that hopefully for the long term, evaluate that. Tools like ProPlay AI, Pitch AI, obviously being a huge piece for us to be able to indicate external rotation issues or trunk flexion extension issues. Great opportunities for us to assess and hopefully provide some insights back to the athlete to change that. So moving on tonight to our next segment, we're going to be jumping into a little discussion around mechanics, so lighten this one up a little bit. It's pretty heavy hitting stuff in the how-to tonight. We're going to move it into our shorts. So, Garrett, here's a tweet that I put out the other day. I told you about this one. I know we laughed pretty hard about it. So I said, hey, Twitter, would you change anything about these 3 deliveries and why? Using ProPlay AI to help break these dudes down. Little help, Flat Ground app. And by the way, shout out Flat Ground app. Reposted this one, retweeted this. Was super stoked about that. Got some good traction because of the Flat Ground app. So much appreciated. Let's check out some of these stick figures that I put up on Twitter. So here's video number 1. And Garrett, I think you know who that one is. We recognize that pelvis anywhere. All right, number 2. So here's our second video. Maybe a little less telling, but should know who that one is as well. And then number 3. Here's our third video. And boom. So pretty interesting. I put these 3 videos up there, had them in our database. Now, I think most people should know by now, if I put up a question like this on Twitter, I'm probably leading for a YouTube video. But want to make a point. I figured this would happen, and I've seen it too often on Twitter. So here's what happened. So I posted this thing up, and I got a flurry of responses. So these were from coaches or from parents or from random people. I don't know, people just commenting on Twitter. So I posted those 3 stick figure videos, and Flat Ground app reposted it. So here's the response. It said, this was the first one. This is maybe my favorite one. All 3 need a little more depth in their legs. Not real sure what that one means. I guess just need to get a little deeper. Maybe. Yeah. All right. Who knows? This is number 1, I think, for me. That one was maybe number 2. So number 1 seems pretty clean. Number 2 appears to finish poorly and possibly bad release point. Bad release point. Number 3 seems to break down backside a bit early and fall off glove side. Guessing misses are probably arm side up and glove side down. Probably has a filthy hook though. Bit in the dirt a lot. Hard to analyze a stick figure. Fun though. Yeah, pretty hard to analyze a stick figure. Thanks for taking the shot. I guess number 3 is falls off glove side, therefore is arm side up and glove side down with their pitches. Yep. I would tell you this person is not very often glove side up glove side down or arm side up. I will tell you that. Next one, lead leg does not fully extend all the way on number 3. Interesting. That was actually one of our guys. A little disappointed, but not quite so disappointed. We had talked about lead leg a few months ago, so I'm happy to see that he's still focused on lead leg, but weighing in on number 3. I don't know about number 3. All right. Next one was, I would work on cleaning up arm swing on 3, 1, and 1. 1 looks the best of the 3. Arm swing on number 3. Okay, good. So, Garrett, let's talk about this tonight. I'm going to go ahead and take these down just to get them off our screen. Let's bring up our videos again. Let's talk a little about who these videos are. So, here's the trick. Here's what I did. Terrible on my part to do this, but all 3 of these athletes are throwing 99 miles an hour. All 3 of them are technically big leaguers. And yeah, so we just had random people chime in and give their input for 3 guys that throw 99 miles an hour and are big leaguers. Good. So I saw something on Twitter the other day. It was actually somebody had weighed in on Mike Trout's swing. And I guess Trout, the story, I don't know how the full story went, but I guess the story was that somebody posted a video of Trout swinging and asked for some, jokingly asked for some tips. and this guy commented in and like legitimately gave him like tips, like, hey, here's what you should do. This is Mike Trout, right? So Trout says, hey, thanks for the swing advice, and like leaves it, like lets it be, whatever, right, jokingly. But apparently this guy was super serious and like critiqued Mike Trout's swing online because he didn't know it was Mike Trout. So kind of the same situation here. I didn't know about the Mike Trout video before I posted this, but same concept, I guess. Getting unsolicited advice. The real point to all this tonight and the discussion I want to have over this in our shorts is really two things: what we actually know about pitching mechanics and biomechanics as a whole, but really the main topic is overcoaching. And Garrett, I know in the strength and conditioning world, is overcoaching prevalent in the strength and conditioning world?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, same with the pitching side of things. I go out to Little League fields all the time, and I go out to high school fields all the time, and I hear so many people wanting to weigh in, right? And in this case, like the tweet that I put out, I gave stick figures. Like I didn't even give like actual video. Like I gave stick figures, and people weighed in with opinions. And then there's more than what I showed tonight, but like people weighed in, like, and wanted to give their opinions. So imagine you're some kid, you're 16 years old, and you're trying to evaluate yourself and try to figure out what's best for your performance or for your health moving forward. And you're seriously putting out a video and asking for help on social media or wherever. Number one, don't do that. Number two, some of these comments, they have no basis. We're just throwing stuff into the wind to say it. Like, we talk about needs depth in legs. Like all three of them throw 99 miles an hour. There's no other context here except for stick figures. And you're telling me all three need more depth in legs? How in the world did you determine from a stick figure if this guy needed more depth in his legs? It doesn't make sense, but we hear that all the time. Hey, you need to stride out further. Hey, stride out further. Hey, you need to get deeper on that back leg. Hey, you need to reach out, right? We just talked about, flexion extension. What if a guy had a massive like mobility issue? Like what if his lead leg doesn't work? Like all these other things affect him reaching out. But we're going to say that all the time. Hey, Johnny, reach out there. Just play and catch. Just reach out. Yeah, I know. It's not that simple. I don't know if you ever pitched in a really big, important game, but kind of hard to do this in front of 10,000 fans. It's like a little difficult. Not as easy as just reach out there. Just like you're throwing to his mitt. Just play catch with him. Yeah, okay, got it. Thanks. Not that simple. But we get this unsolicited advice all the time, and we're overcoaching. People want to hear them. They want to try to help, right? Which is the basis of this. To, number one, first say it's okay to want to help. That's awesome. But realize that you can do more damage than good by yelling out at a kid, hey, just bend over. Just gotta, get the trunk. Gotta take the nose to toes. You're like, oh man, like no, like don't say that, because now the kid's thinking about nose to toes and he's not thinking about executing a pitch and throwing the pitch, which is already hard enough. Playing catch with the catcher, like it's already hard enough to just throw a ball in that direction and not get hit. Like now you're trying to put all this other expectation on guys. So I'm gonna go a million different directions here. But Garrett, tell me about overcoaching in the weight room. What are some of the things that you've noticed in your time in strength and conditioning? Some things you've learned, and some maybe the approaches that you changed over the years to make sure that you're not overcoaching in the weight room.
Yeah. So the biggest thing is meeting the athlete where they're at, especially from the weight room side. If I've cued you 4 or 5 different times, it's probably not the correct exercise that you should be doing. You should probably have regressed the pattern to a certain level where it's like 1 or 2 quick cues and the athlete gets it in that quick time, and then just progression along that spectrum that we have is really where it's at. And meeting where the athlete is really crucial in the weight room, so the athlete can succeed in the weight room and then get over to the pitching side as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I look at this from the context of, where do we help an athlete, right? And we start talking about assessments. First off, I look online, and I'll be straightforward. We've looked at guys online. There's some really good Instagram accounts, and there's some really bad Instagram accounts, okay? And there's some mediocre Instagram accounts. And I would tell you that I've looked at a few pitcher breakdowns, and some of them being our athletes. And we have full assessment data on those pitchers' breakdowns. And I sit here and laugh. I go, kids are really watching this and taking notes. They're really evaluating what this pitcher looks like. So actually, I can think of one video specifically. We have the guy's video right here, and it's part of our stick figure set right today. That just kind of clicked. But no, so point is like we have that data. Like you're looking at a video from a YouTube clip at 30 frames per second, or maybe 60 frames per second, or whatever the frame rate is, and you're sitting here evaluating somebody who's moving through super high range. If you can tell me where the pelvis is positionally from just before foot plant to after ball release, like if you can tell me the degree at which the pelvis is sitting, I would pay you $1 billion. Like if you can accurately do it time over time and not screw up, if you can be within 5 degrees, I'd be grossly impressed. It doesn't happen. It's impossible. I've looked at a million pitches in my lifetime. Like I could tell you a million things about pitches, right? But I can't sit here and evaluate a pitcher and be like, oh, with the naked eye, I can tell you if that guy's pelvis is rotating on time. There's no way. I have to have information. So for me as a coach, when I talk about over coaching, we have to have context as to why we're going to say the things we're going to say. Okay. Encouragement is one thing. And encouragement is not over, coaching in terms of mechanics. Encouragement's like, hey man, you got this. Like, absolutely. We talked about one of our favorite athletes. Like, dude is unbelievably good. Like, and he will focus on everything except for the one thing that he needs to focus on. And for the first times, like we get him, to really focus on those things. He's just lights out. He's unbelievable. And so we sit here and we laugh. We're like, man, like, I really want to continue to see more athletes understand the specificity of the thing that they need like in the moment to work on day in and day out. Not me just throw a bunch of cues at him and hope that something sounds good so that he returns and comes back and works with our business again. That's not the way to do business, right? So if I'm looking at things and I'm trying to do right as a coach, like it's really important for me to have the context first and foremost to validate the thing that I'm going to say if it's from a coaching perspective. And I think that's really, really important. And oftentimes coaches don't go to the depth of what they could get to help an athlete out. They make gross assertions, and those gross assertions are where guys end up clinging tight. So again, if I'm that 16-year-old kid, I put my stuff out there, and there's this gross assertion that sounds right to me, I may go down the rabbit hole for a long time, trying to figure that out. But it's if we really don't break this out, right? There's encouragement in the day-to-day structure of trying to get a guy to pick up his spirits a little bit and pick up the energy and go get it, have that intent, right? It's a big word. So figuring out how to get guys to have intent on a daily basis, that's one thing. We have cueing, which is like teaching the movement itself. And then we have the whole idea of the education behind the movement itself. So I look at those 3 categories, right? And Garrett, talk to me a little bit about like how you go about in the weight room, that moment of education, and then how you go about directing the cueing component, the energy stuff, and the intent we'll leave off to the side for a second. But how do you go from the education of the content to the cueing of the content? What's your goals when you do those things?
So usually it goes first to cueing, and then it's usually once they're done with that first set and they've done the cue the way I want them to execute the cue, then I go into usually the educational part, just so it gives them a base of like, oh, okay, that's why he cued it that way, or that's why I do this exercise that way. And it's just a back and forth between the cueing and then the education. And sometimes you have to always educate the athlete again, or remind them if they haven't been in a while, or they're coming back for summer or winter or whenever, why we do certain things, and just keep iterating that educational piece, just so the athlete can, when he finally does leave for school, they know exactly how to do everything without having a coach on top of them to get on them to actually execute the exercise correctly.
So I think a lot of the question oftentimes goes to coaches. It gets asked like, well, how do I have enough time to educate somebody to the depth of what this topic is and also work with them on the floor and cue them? Because, reality is, and you and I know this more than anything, right? Like you're on the floor in the day, man. It's all systems go. You got 4 guys coming through. You got another 2 guys over here. You got 1 guy walking in the door over there. You got a new guy that just walked in the building. And it's like, your systems really have to be strong to get all that to take care of itself. But the one thing that we've done uniquely as a business that I think I really enjoy watching, and something that you and I have talked more about, is we have this thing called Coop. And Coop is, for those of you who don't know, those of you who have trained with us in-house, you know about Coop. For those of you who don't train with us in-house, you don't know about Coop, because it's a secret content space for our athletes, where we have a password protected content space for our athletes, where our athletes can go in and see videos on, our how-tos. They can watch, exercises. They can see write-ups around, community notes and around updates around what's happening in our community. It's just a space for our athletes to go and learn more about the things that are happening at our facility. But the reason why we built it was because we recognized, like, we don't have time. And for me to try to resource people to all of these different links and spaces to learn from, even like white papers, guys don't have time to read white papers, and most guys don't understand white papers. Like, it's not going to be white papers to do it. So we need to be able to, take the baton there, take the information, make sure we educate our athletes in that one-on-one moment, so to speak, where we're able to get the athlete, direct them to some content and say, hey, here's some homework for you. I want you to go look this up. Great question. Or, hey, I saw you do this, and my question for you, why did you do it that way? And now there's this teachable moment that comes up out of that. And we go, hey, I want you to, here's some homework for you. I'm going to send this to you. Here's a link. Go check this out. And that is, that platform for us. So my encouragement for you guys as coaches, if you're wondering, how do we do that? It could be as simple as just a Google Drive, template, a sheet, right? Just a bunch of links on a sheet and build some videos. It takes time, but one of the things, part of our training environment, our training atmosphere, is being able to direct people to those links and help them with that. So I think that's how we've kind of uniquely met the challenge of education. And then the queuing part, you're right. It's there's a question of, like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg kind of deal. And it's like, do you have the queue before the education, or the education before the queue? I think as the athlete's education builds, the queuing gets deeper. And sometimes the self-sufficiency around the queuing becomes much greater as well once we've built up the education. So I think it's just communication, like you said from the very beginning. Meeting athletes where they are is really important. There's one last thing I want to touch on here, and I want to bring it up as a story. Garrett, you know the story all too well. And it's, really kind of how I got into all of this in the first place, which is, I want to make sure we understand that as coaches, that sometimes our teachings, the things that we think are right, the way that we approach the business side of things, if you're somebody who's doing lessons, right, or you're trying to sell somebody on coming to your program as a college coach, we get into a routine of saying things that may not always be best for the athlete. I'll just say it that way. I'll give you the example. When I was 16 years old, I did a biomechanics report for the first time. They put me in markers, my compression shorts. It was probably 2006, something like that, 7. And I was throwing hard. I was throwing like 90 miles an hour. I was a sophomore in high school, and I remember going to this cold lab, and it was super awkward. At 16 years old, you're sitting in compression shorts trying to throw for some people. It's a little weird. It's like most people's worst nightmare, right? And I remember this lab tech guy was, putting markers on me or whatever, and I threw a pitch, and one of the markers went flying off, and all these people, interns probably, scrambled. I had no idea what was going on at the time. They all scrambled to grab it in the marker and put it on me, and as that's happening, I saw this guy look like a coach. I just want to know how hard I was throwing, and they told me, throw about 10 fastballs. So I said to him, how hard am I throwing? He said, oh, you're about 89, 91. And I was like, wow, all right, good. So I'm like, not bad in underwear, that's good. I'll take that. So I didn't really have a whole lot of time to warm up, and it was just kind of a weird setting. But they were trying to collect research to study some things. And this guy walked up to me afterward, and he says to me, hey, man, this is the coach. He goes, hey, you have some mechanical issues that you need to work on. And I said, oh. I said, well, like what? And he goes, well, if you don't fix some things mechanically, you're going to have Tommy John surgery within the next 2 years. I was 16 years old. And I was like, oh, man, well, tell me what I need to do, and I'd definitely be interested. And I don't want to have Tommy John surgery. I was 16. What do I know? Right? And so within 2 years, I had Tommy John surgery. And that guy's words echoed in my head. Still to this day, I can remember the whole thing super vividly. But at 17 years old, pushing 18, I remember distinctly that conversation, and I was like, man, that guy knew. That guy had the answers. And so his follow up was basically, if you pay me $2,000, I'll have you fixed in a couple months. You just got to work with me $2,000 a month for a couple months. I'll have you fixed, right? And I kind of laugh. I look at that now and I'm like, man, like that guy was just trying to sell me on a program. He really didn't know if I was going to have Tommy John surgery or not. But back then, if I was 16, 17, 18 years old, I could have sworn that guy had all the answers. And I just didn't have the funds to figure that out. So that's a real moment though, right? Like at 17 years old, I went down the path of trying to alter my mechanics completely. I was one of the top pitchers in the country. I was supposed to be a first-round draft pick. I had Tommy John surgery, and I went to trying to change everything about my arm action to how my legs worked, and I was asking people like viciously, like, what do I need to do to stay healthy? And nobody had an answer for me. So because this guy put that in my head, at 17 years old, I made the decision. I was going to change my arm path, change the way I threw, do all this stuff mechanically. And for about a year, I chased that. I lost a scholarship in the SEC. I came back home, still lost. I had no idea what to do by mechanics. Couldn't compete in junior college. I competed, but I didn't compete at my best because I was constantly lost looking for that change that I needed, because my fear was that if I wasn't healthy, I wasn't going to make it to the big leagues. I thought I had the talent no matter what to do it. I just felt like I was always going to get hurt. And so that's a good example of how somebody just saying something to sell me as a kid on getting somewhere truly altered my career and my life. I don't blame him for it, right? But words are powerful. And when we start to put stuff up on social media like this with stick figures on 3 dudes throwing 99 that you didn't know, but 3 dudes throwing 99, big leaguers, right? We got to be careful with our words. We got to be smarter about how we handle our words, because it's ridiculous that we would have that many people weigh in on something that they literally know nothing about, right? That's scary, because some kid is going to be doing the same thing. He's going to put this message up there to the world, and the response is, hey, just do this. It's that simple. No, it's really not. The same in the weight room, right?
Yeah.
Like if you cue somebody improperly, or you just say something to somebody off the cuff, like, oh, that's not important, don't worry about that. No. Like, just because you don't want to talk about it today, is that why it's not important? Or is it actually not important to that kid? Or did you actually do your research on the assessment component of it and tell me that, no, that's not important because? Or are you just worried about your ego? Or are you just worried about the way you look to that kid, that you have to be the almighty with all the knowledge, right? We shouldn't be like that. We should be transparent. A great environment, one of the things I love that you do so much is you're like, guys will ask you a question, like, I don't know. Right? And I do it all the time. Like, and you do it. I think it's hilarious to me how you do it, because you have this stone faced look. You're like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I have no idea. And sometimes it's pitching me like, I have no idea. Ask Casey. Like, right? But you don't have to be the all knowing guy. And I think that's one of the issues that, especially with the presence of social media today, everybody wants to play the all knowing, and we shouldn't. So, any follow up, any final comments there, Garrett, with that process?
I think there's a time to talk and a time to not talk. Majority of the time, it's not to talk.
I mean, and so from a coaching perspective, right? Like I laugh because it's we have so many young kids that it's building relationships with them, and it's getting to know them. And I think once you've earned their trust, a lot of times you earn their trust by just being completely transparent and honest with them. And so sometimes, like you said, not talking to hear yourself talk is probably a good thing, right? Like not getting to a point where you're just constantly rambling about, hey, I read this research paper the other day and it says to do this, and this is why we should do this. And it's like, to be honest with you, man, like half these kids, they really don't care. Like half these kids, and not that they don't care about their training, they just don't care that, that specific thing that you read a research paper on, they don't really care about the end result of that. What they care about is, like we always talk about, one of two things: health or velocity or performance. And oftentimes that's labeled as velocity. But I think we can kind of close it on that one. But I think it's, again, if I could give one closing message on this one, I'm really, like, I laughed the whole Sunday, like watching these comments come in. Really seriously, like, concerns me that we're that deep into the industry where people constantly are given a platform to have an opinion and impact it. Because I know how much it changed my career. Seriously, just one off the cuff comment, trying to upsell me, make a quick buck for a couple months in terms of the pitching lessons, completely altered my career. So careful with what you say, and I'll be posting up on Twitter. So more often with some of these things. not so much just to trap people. That's not the goal, but to hopefully educate and give some space to provide context around some of these things. So with that being said, let's move on tonight to close things out. We have the wrap. Garrett, good 17 episodes, man.
Well, I've only been in like 12 of them.
That's
but,
true. All right,
yeah,
well,
so it's like 13 for me.
The Lennon and Mike episodes have been really good, and Woody was
great.
Crushed it on the on the show. So no, it's been really good, and I'm super excited about the next couple that we have coming out. Give you guys a heads up. We are now moving to a non-cadence, meaning that we're going to be just announcing on Twitter when our new episodes roll out. We might put out 2 times in a week, one time. I don't know, why not? But we might put out once every other week. We're doing these when we feel like doing them at this point because we've just enjoyed it and built so much content around this. We want to keep getting more information to you guys and make this really quality. We had a couple of episodes that we felt like we had some people lined up and we didn't want to rush them. So we've been just kind of slowly building out this content. Some of our how-tos especially are pretty in depth. Garrett's how-to tonight, really good one. And so when we do this stuff, we don't want to rush it for you guys. We want to provide you guys the best quality of content. So for that reason, we'll be going on a non-cadence, meaning that we'll be announcing. So if you guys want the latest when these episodes drop, hop on Twitter. Check it out on KineticPro. Kinetic_Pro is it's at Kinetic_Pro. That's us on Twitter. We'll be announcing that as it comes out. So a lot of cool partners that we have coming up. We're going to be a couple more episodes, Garrett and I here, doing some new stuff, and excited to continue to bring some of the more live stuff, like our social media, getting more interactive with you guys on social media, whether it be Instagram or Twitter. Instagram is at KineticPro Performance. Feel free to interact with us, ask us questions, comment on our story, comment on our posts. Have some more content coming at you guys that way as well. So with that being said, Garrett, video shoot this week went really well.
Yeah.
Some cool content coming from that. Dude, beard looked really good on the video shoot, by the way. Man. Yeah, no. I know you've been working hard on.
I've been working hard.
Do you try to go down, or you try to go out? Or how does this work?
Like it just keeps like sometimes if I straighten it, I do have a straightener, so like I can straighten it. And it looks like really long. And then sometimes if I just let it go, it'll just like. Do
you use like product in there?
I have some like beard oil and like some like beard balm, I guess.
Any recommendations to the aspiring beards out there?
No.
Okay, good. So
I don't have the best. I don't have the best beard in the facility, so I'm not the guy.
Who's the best beard?
Quack.
Shout out.
Quack has the best beard. So
Quack has the best beard. So Quack, if you have any tips, we might bring you up on an episode in the future. Apparently, Garrett is all natural, just lets it flow and looks good. So, anyways, with that being said, we'll close it out tonight. Garrett, any closing remarks on our episode tonight?
Nope.
No, man of many words. Love it. All right, guys. Appreciate the time as always. We'll see you guys on the next one. Later.